Salute! It's Magister Hodges, and these are your notes for Chapter 2, which we're going to talk about verbs and how they work, and I am going to do my best to keep this quick and painless. On the presentation, you will find a link to the fill-in-the-blank note sheet. If you are watching this on the day that I am out from school, then you should find these notes on the top shelf by the door, so I would suggest you go and grab those first. Let's get going. So we're talking about verbs. Verbs are actions. And when describing verbs in Latin, we're going to start out with these three important terms. And I'm going to move my little face here. I'm going to float down here for a little while. So the three important terms you'll see at the top of your note sheet are person, number, and tense. We're going to worry more about person and number because right now we're only learning about the present tense. A verb's person describes who the subject is, whether it is I or you or he, she, or it, or someone's name, or we, y'all, or they. These are described as first, second, and third person, respectively. The second important term is number. And while that may be confusing, considering the person is described as first, second, or third, sounds like a number. Number just means whether there's one or multiple things doing it, so singular or plural. Then, like I said, tense just tells you when the verb is happening. Like we can talk about the past tense, the present tense, the future tense, and all the other ones in between. But for right now, we're just going to, like I said, we're focusing on the present tense. So that's not too important. So down here, if we look at the bottom, we're just talking about subjects first, the person doing the action. So you'll see here the rows, first, second, and third person. This column is singular. This column is plural. So a first person singular noun, that means that its subject is going to be I. The Latin word for I is ego. So you'll if you see ego in a sentence, that means the verb will probably be first person. It is first person singular. But it can get a little more complicated than that, so just stick with me. First person's plural means that we are the subject. The Latin word for we is nos. Second person singular, the subject for a second person singular noun is you, Latin tu. And the second person plural, in correct English, the Queen's English, is you still. When you say like you plural, like hey, you, and talking to a bunch of people. But here in the South, we say y'all. And while it is kind of redneck, I do like the word y'all because it's one syllable and you can immediately tell it's second person plural. So I'm going to be using the word y'all just to avoid confusion. If you do not like the word y'all, that sucks. All right. Now, third person singular and third person plural. These are the most common ones that we'll see. So if a verb is third person singular, that means that he, she, or it is the subject, or some type of nominative singular noun like mater or lupa or Romulus, for example. Third person plural means the subject is they, or it could be a nominative plural noun, which we really haven't seen a whole lot of yet. But like, for example, in the story we read at the beginning of Chapter 2 about the Menaechmes brothers, you know, he says they are like two peas in a pod, sunt, or like two drops of water, or something like that. And that word aquae, it's like plural for water. So that's all of these. All right. So Latin is, if you've taken Spanish, this will seem pretty similar. Latin shows the person, number, and tense of a verb by changing the verb's ending. So that's why we kind of looked at this in the word hunt we did after reading De Menaechmes. And you saw that all the verbs, like they had slightly different endings, and that changed who was doing it. Tense changes in the same way, but we're not going to see that for a little bit. So we're going to not worry about that. So here's an example. This is probably the most popular example of a Latin verb that people use. When you see it in your vocabulary list, it'll look like this: amo, amare, amawi, amatus. You're given 4 different forms of it, and we're going to talk about that a little later. But amo, amare, or as I'll just say, amo, means to love. And so let's talk about how this changes. So this second one, amare, ending with an re, that's just what we call the infinitive form. There's not a subject. It just means to love. Okay, so that's what amare means. If you see an re at the end of a word, at the end of a verb, then it's going to mean to blank, whatever that verb means. And then we start to conjugate it. You'll see down here, like on the last page, we have first, second, and third person, singular and plural. And look at how the verb amo changes. It goes, amo, ending with an O, means I love. Amas, ending with an S, means you love. Amat, ending with a T, means he, she, or it loves. Amamus means we love, with the mus ending means we. Amatis means y'all love. That TIS ending means y'all is the subject. And amant, they love. The NT ending means they is the subject. And that's basically it. Most verbs will change in this way. So it helps to remember the endings. O, S, T, mus, tis, unt. In that order. First, second, third person singular. First, second, third person plural. O, S, T, mus, tis, unt. I, you, he, she, it, we, y'all, they. All right, here's another example of another word, slightly different, but still you can see the idea is the same. The second principal part, debere, means to owe, and then we start adding the endings on o, s, t, mus, tis, unt. Debeo, I owe. Debes, you owe. Debet, he, she, or it owes. Debemus, we owe. Debetis, y'all owe. And debent, they owe. And that's basically how verbs work. Like that's how they change. So sometimes, whoops, I was about to get ahead of myself. So here's an example of what they look like in a sentence. I have colored the subject and the verb ending red, so they stick out. And you can see how they change depending on the subject. So if I say ego canem meam amo, that means I, my dog, love. I love my dog. Since I is the subject, amo ends with the letter O. Tu canem tuam amas, you love your dog. Since the subject is tu, the verb will end with S. Is, and is just means he. Is canem suam amat, he loves his dog. Nos canem nostram amamus. Nos means we, so the verb will end with mus. They have to agree with each other. We call that subject-verb agreement. Nos canem nostram amamus, we love our dog. Vos canem vestram amatis. Vos means y'all, so the verb will end with tis, to agree, and that sentence will mean y'all love your dog. And ei canem suam amant means they love their dog. Ei means they, so the verb to agree will end with nt. And and that's basically how it works. Now, let's look with some infinitives. When we were talking about those infinitives, the one that end with re, and that just means to blank. You'll also notice here that I have gotten rid of all the subjects, but we can still look over here at amo, and if we know that o means I am the subject, if the verb ends with o, that means I am the one doing it, then canem meam videre amo means I love videre, to see, canem meam, my dog. Canem tuam vocare amas, you love vocare, to call your dog. It's you love because amas ends with an S. Canem suam agitare amat, he loves to chase his dog. To chase, agitare, amat ends with a T, so that can mean he, she, or it loves. Either of those would be fine there. Canem nostram salutare amamus. Amamus ends with a mus, that means the subject is we. First person plural. Salutare means to greet, so this means we love to greet our dog. Canem vestram ludere amatis. Amatis ends with a tis, that means the subject will be y'all. Amatis means y'all love. Ludere, to play with. Canem vestram, your dog. Canem suam dicere amant. Amant ends with an nt, tells us the subject is they. Dicere means to speak or to talk. So canem suam dicere amant means they love amant. Dicere, to talk to. Canem suam, their dog. Okay. So do you even need, this leads to the question, is ego or tu or nos or vos or is or ei, are they even necessary? Are those subjects even necessary at the beginning of a sentence? And really they're not a lot of the time, because like I said earlier, you can tell who's doing the action just by looking at the last letter of a verb. That's why it's important to remember that ost, mustis, unt, and what each of those letters mean. That'll be very helpful to you. It's more important than remembering the endings of the declensions. because the verb tends to carry the most meaning in the sentence. So if you don't know what the ending of a verb means, then you're losing a lot of meaning. If you don't know who's doing it, then the sentence, it's going to be really hard for the sentence to make sense. So there are some cases though where you want to give to provide a nominative noun or a subject, and that's only when you need to give the subject of the sentence a name. So for example, if I just said Kanam suam amat, that means he, she, or it loves his, her, or its dog. But if I replace, if I just put Bill at the beginning of the sentence and the verb ends with a T, that means that he, she, or it, or someone's name is doing it. So instead of it being he loves his dog, I'll say Bill loves his dog. Or down here, amant, nt, that can mean they, or a nominative plural noun. So our nominative plural noun here will be puelai, who's our subject, and that means the girls. So whereas kanam suam amant can mean they love their dog, if I put puelai in the nominative plural at the beginning, that now means the girls love their dog. So when you want to specify who's doing it, not just say he, she, or it, or they, or I, you, or we, or y'all, then you are going to want to see a nominative noun. And we're going to see those a lot of the time. Okay, there's one last thing in terms of the verbs, and that is irregular verbs. Irregular verbs do not necessarily follow the pattern of OST, mustus, unt. And sometimes they can change the word entirely depending on which person and number they are, whether they're first, second, or third, or singular, or plural. So the most common example of this, unfortunately, is one of the most common words that we see, and that is the verb sum, esse, fui, futurus, which means to be. We've seen this word a lot already in the form of est. Est, we know, means he, she, or it is. We've also seen sum, meaning I am. We've also seen es, meaning you are. So, and we've seen soon. We've actually seen most of these already. So just notice here how it goes sum es est, sumus estis sunt. Half the time, this thing starts with an E, and the other half of the time starts with an S. It can be confusing. Unfortunately, the only way to know this is to just memorize it. And this verb is so common that you'll, likely just learn it over time. But it is important that you write these down and that you study these specifically because it can be confusing because it does not follow the pattern. Okay, so intermission. I would say if you haven't gotten everything filled in or you feel like at this point you don't totally understand it, then I would suggest going back and in the video and reviewing some of those parts. I'm going to pause the video here and I'm going to make a part 2 for part 2 of our notes, which is on the back side of this sheet. Okay, so walete for now.